Hello, America. Welcome to your Leo Nation, where you know that we believe in and support the rule of law. I am the Chief, Mark Garrett. I'm very excited today for the two guests that we have. A guest that you are familiar with if you are a listener to your Leo Nation. That's John Mckinney, Assistant District Attorney of Los Angeles County. John, how are you today, sir?
Good morning. Good morning. Great to be here.
It is great to have you here as well. And our special guest today is actually, John, your former opponent in this race for the DA's office, and that's Nathan Hochman. Nathan, how are you, sir?
Great to be on. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. We know how busy you are. I know you are in the car right now running to an appointment, and we really appreciate you making the time to be on. And I, want to cut to the chase. First of all, like I said, what John and you were former opponents, but in the same effort to defeat the train wreck that we all know by the name of George Gascon as Los Angeles County DA. And I want to say this before we get specifically into your strategy and your goals, your vision for that job, Nathan, is that when we have contests like this and we are fighting a common enemy in really the opposition from his point of view to the rule of law, George Gascon, what it does, it brings the cream of the crop out. And people like you, John, are rising to the top. And these are the types of problems that we want to have to really find people like you. They're already there, but are all doing collectively the same thing, that we want to get back to rule of law. We want to get back to a civil society and protecting the citizens and the residents of Los Angeles County. So with that said, I just, again, excited to have you here. I know that you're a lifelong resident, except for some assignments outside of the state of California over your life of Los Angeles County. You are a former federal prosecutor as well as a U.S. Assistant Attorney General. And before we get into what you're going to do when you're elected, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and specifically the respective roles of federal prosecutor and versus U.S. Assistant Attorney General?
Certainly. So you're right. I am a lifelong Angelino. Born here, grew up here, married now 31 years, raised my three kids now in their 20s here in LA. And so I had the chance to spend over the last 34 years my professional career in criminal justice. And it started in on the prosecutor side, as you were saying, after I did a judicial clerkship, went right to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I didn't have the pleasure, as John has had for 26 years, I believe, to be in the DA's office. But in the U.S. Attorney's Office, I got a chance to do the whole panoply of cases, from violent gang members, prosecutions to narcotics traffickers, international money launderers. I went after corrupt cops, corrupt public officials, ran the environmental crime section, went after ARC and land polluters. And then 10 years after that, I got a presidential nomination, a unanimous U.S. Senate confirmation to become the U.S. Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Department of Justice's tax division. Got to head a $100 million budgeted office with 350 lawyers doing cases all over the nation. Then I came back to LA and went to the other side again as a defense attorney. And have had the chance to head two major international law firms, government investigations practices, and was the president of the LA City Ethics Commission and the co-founder of the LA Sheriff's Foundation. And so it does give me that sort of 360 perspective. If I am the DA, I'll be the only DA, probably, well, not probably, in history, who's not only had a prosecutorial background, but a defense background as well. And I think that does give me a perspective on how to approach this serious criminal justice problem we have in LA County with proportionality, common sense, and balance.
Well, you know what? Speaking of your website, and we're going to get into that, um, it's it it is absolutely fantastic, and I say that from a former cop and doing investigations and doing research. And I'm going to talk about your website here in a little bit. Everybody should go to it. I want to bounce back to John just for a moment here, John, before we let Nathan really articulate what he's going to do as the DA. From your point of view, as someone who's philosophically aligned with Nathan, strategically aligned. You are an avid, outspoken supporter and colleague and comrade of Nathan now, as I am. Um, what is your perspective as far as Nathan taking this on and really doing everything that you and we collectively can do to uproot and get rid of George Gascon?
Well, I'm very, very excited about the prospect of Nathan Hochman becoming the 44th District Attorney of Los Angeles County, and for so many reasons. And it's not just because the current office holder is so inept, although that's a big part of it. He is just a premium individual to step into the fray and run for public office in this time that we live in. We don't see a lot of high quality people, proven leaders, taking on the role of a candidate and willing to step in and be a major political figure anymore. Those people have decided that they just don't need it, and they're staying in the private sector and they're staying in other public roles. So I think this is a real opportunity for voters in Los Angeles County to elect a real substantive leader. There are a few other people throughout our local government, I think, who fit that bill, but not enough, certainly. So I think for someone who's been in the district attorney's office for 26 years now, as I have, who have seen this organization run in a much better way than it's been run over the last 4 years, I think I speak for many, many of my colleagues that we're hopeful. So people are on their knees every night praying. There are those of us who are gone out with Nathan and trying to do everything we can to spread the word, because once people learn about him, they're going to say, oh, this guy's fantastic. And so part of the challenge is not just pointing out the ineptitude of the current office holder, but introducing Nathan to the communities around Los Angeles. And then the rest will take care of itself.
John, you make an excellent point about not focusing just on how bad the current DA is, and all that's true, but you're absolutely right. It's more important to focus on how good his opponent, Nathan Hochman, is and what he has to bring to the people of Los Angeles County. Nathan, as I said a few minutes ago, your website, and just FYI, I see that you're muted there in case you want to unmute yourself. Um, your your website is stellar. It is specific, it is concise, it is unambiguous about what you plan to do as the DA. It goes point by point about what your plan is. There are no platitudes in there. There are no generalities. It is very, very razor sharp about what your plan is. I think it's fantastic. And one of the parts of it is called Blueprint for Justice, and under that you have a lot of different subcategories. And I picked out a few here that I find very important. They're all very important, but for the sake of time, I wanted to make sure we focus on a few of these. And the first one there under Blueprint for Justice is restore the purpose of the district attorney's office. And I'd like for you to talk about that if you could.
Certainly. So part of the huge ineptitude of George Gascon is that he has squandered and actually ruined one of the best district attorney's offices in the United States. The LA County District Attorney's Office used to be the gold standard by which all other district attorney's offices in California, and I wouldn't just limit it to California, I'd say the entire nation used to look to. They were the best trained deputy district attorneys. They actually trained others. They were doing the cutting edge cases. They were using the best technology and the best techniques. All that has been in many ways squandered by George Gascon. I mean, the fact that he didn't promote a John McKinney and actually retaliated against John McKinney and took him out from being one of the premier trial attorneys in the office and brought him over to East Los Angeles to supervise misdemeanors at the time. And again, there's nothing wrong with supervising misdemeanors, but when you have someone as talented as John McKinney, and that's, you're almost intimidated by him, that is not the way to run a DA's office. I mean, it's not a shock that 98% of the 750 deputy district attorneys supported George Gascon's recall. It's not a shock that George Gascon has been sued by more of his employees, over 20 of them, than any other DA probably in history. So again, my job is to maximize the greatest resource in the DA's office. And it's not the courtrooms, it's not the cases, it's not the computers, it's not the toner. It's the deputy district attorneys who are going into court every day across this county to represent and bring justice to the people of Los Angeles County. Now, my job in maximizing that resource is to make sure they get the resources, they get the training, they get the credit for the successes that they accomplish. And we build up and we rebuild an esprit de corps that is absolutely missing. In fact, the DA's office is down over 200 deputy district attorneys because the senior ones don't want to work for George Gascon. And people thinking about coming to LA County are going to other counties because why would you want to work for George Gascon? So my job from day one, actually even before day one, will be to work with these deputy district attorneys, find out what's working, and if it is working, basically scale it and give credit to whoever brought it in. And for the vast number of things that are not working, get consensus with these deputy district attorneys on what will work. Again, implement, scale, monitor. If it's working, you go even bigger. If it's not working, you pivot and do something else. But you have to do it in connection with and learning from the deputy district attorneys on the ground. George Gascon simply doesn't understand that and is basically run that office, and I've called it catastrophically incompetent manner.
Well said. And you touched on something. Actually, was the next point. I guess great minds think alike, or great minds in my mind, let's put it that way, think alike, because you went right from the restore the purpose of the DA, and you rolled into restoring the trust in the district attorney, and you talked about those 98% of the deputy DAs who supported his recall. Now, look, I was a chief of the California Highway Patrol. There are so many people that I admire throughout history, and one of the things that we all know that if you don't have the trust and respect of your own team, that the organization around you, without which you cannot function, you cannot be successful. It's just that you cannot be successful, depending on what your definition of success is. I think that Gascon's definition of success is, quite frankly, destroying the rule of law and creating chaos in Los Angeles County. But I would love for you to talk a little more, and you hit on it very well, but a little more about the lack of trust that this man has from his own team of DAs.
So, and again, you hit on the right word, trust, because the problem is that George Gascon came in on his first day in office, first hour in office, first email, and issued 9 special directives that basically changed the course of criminal justice in Los Angeles County on behalf of criminals and away from victims. And he did it without consulting with the vast majority of these deputy district attorneys who collectively represent thousands of years of prosecutorial experience. And he, shockingly, comes into the job with having never prosecuted or defended a single criminal case in his life. So you would think with that absolute lack of experience, he would turn to the people with the most amount of experience and say, guys, what is working? What is not working? Let's work together and make this office, incredibly productive. Because the number one mission for the DA's office is to promote justice, fairness, and the safety of the people of Los Angeles County. George Gascon wasn't interested in basically that mission because he enacted policies, and these are policies I'm sure you're familiar with and we can discuss, that basically tell juveniles that they can commit misdemeanor thefts and not be prosecuted by the DA's office. And a misdemeanor theft is stealing less than $950. He originally got rid of the gun enhancement. So if you use a gun during a robbery, you're not going to be charged for using that gun. He got rid of the gang enhancement. So if you're engaged in violent crimes and you're part of a gang, well, again, the gangs didn't disappear, but the enhancement certainly has disappeared. And you can go, step by step through what he has done to basically handcuff his own prosecutors. I mean, it's shocking. He's taken the handcuffs effectively off the criminals and put them on his own prosecutors, and he's put them on law enforcement as well.
He absolutely has. And again, there are a number of bullet points, and this is in your website. There are a number of bullet points that are easy for people to read and to understand. And quite frankly, when you're able to say something very clearly in a short amount of time, it's an indication of how bright somebody is. And I'm not here to kiss anybody's rear end, but you and your team, the way they put this together is great. I'm saying that because there's so many bullet points there, but you keep hitting on the few that I thought that were important as well to bring out in the time that we have today. And again, you kind of rolled over into one I want to talk about, actually a few, but one of them is restoring the priority of protecting victims' interest. And like you said, when you're handcuffing the deputy DAs, we can't do that. But I would, I've had the widow of one of the El Monte Police Department officers that was murdered, have had her in this show. And of course, she feels like, and so many, countless other victims and loved ones of victims in Los Angeles County feel that the current DA has turned his back on them. And I would really love you to speak to that constituency in Los Angeles County right now about what you plan to do to restore their interest in this process.
George Gascon abandoning victims is probably the most tragic stakeholder in the system that he has abandoned. I mean, it's not just his own prosecutors, it's not just law enforcement, but it's victims that count on the DA's office to be their champion. They have no one really else in the system to be their champion. It's got to be the DA's office. And one of the policies that he enacted that sort of illustrate this the best is that for decades DAs and prosecutors used to go with victim families who suffered a relative who was murdered when they were confronting that murderer at a parole hearing, and the murderer was trying to get out of prison early. And the reason the DA would be with the victim family is not just because of giving them emotional support, but because the prosecutor gets unique access to the materials and information being considered by the parole board, and can make the best arguments on behalf of the victim family. The victim family does not get access to this information. So what we've seen, again, first day, first hour, first email, is that George Gascon forbade prosecutors to go with victim families when they're confronting murderers at their parole hearing. And so what I would do, and what I have said very clearly, is from day one, I would reverse that policy. I would make sure that victims understood that when they when they call and count on the DA's office, that the DA's office is going to pick up the phone and actually respond and be their champion. I mean, I've had a chance to speak to rallies of people, Justice for Murdered Children groups. George Gascon refuses to talk to them. I went to their rally. I saw the hurt, the pain, the suffering that these families have gone through. And the fact that George Gascon does not understand that that is part of his mission is, again, probably the biggest tragedy.
It certainly is. I would like, Nathan, for you to talk about, and again, you touched on this, but dive a little deeper into this. And this is a couple of things here that John and I talked about in the past. I would like for you to chime in. Is specifically on the sentencing enhancements. Really, what that means. I know there are a lot of people listening that they're not law enforcement, that are not on the legal side, things like that. But to explain in general what sentencing enhancements are, and then how they've been abandoned by the current DA, how you want to utilize them in the future, really what they mean to public safety.
Certainly, let me use the gun enhancement because in some ways it's a pretty clear one to understand. So if you're a criminal and you're thinking about robbing a store or something, if you go ahead and you bring a gun with you and you stick the gun in someone's face and say, "Give me your money," you're much more likely to actually have them give you your money than not. But what prevents you from bringing that gun that day? Well, one of the things that prevents you is the notion that if you actually use a gun, there's an enhanced sentence that can happen where you can get additional years in jail just by using the gun in commission of that particular crime. And it helps deter robbers, or has helped deter over the last decades that it's been in place, using the firearms or the guns in connection with the crime. But if Gascon comes in and says, look, we're not prosecuting that gun enhancement at all, then effectively you're using the gun or not using the gun is the same crime or the same punishment. You're then incentivized, if you were thinking about it, to actually use the gun because you want that crime to be successful. That is an absolute misuse of the tools that a DA has in making it very clear to criminals that we are going to sanction you extra heavy if you go ahead and use a gun in the commission of a crime. For him not to use that tool makes absolutely no sense. It literally is, it's something that defense attorneys have been asking for decades, but never a prosecutor making that suggestion. So George Gascon has basically acted as the super defense attorney out there. I mean, he actually boasts, by the way, of saving violent and serious criminals over 10,000 years of prison time by not bringing these type of enhancements or these additional crimes that the law and the facts would otherwise justify. That's just shocking. You know, again, he should get the Defense Attorney Year of the Year award. But as far as being a prosecutor, he's on the wrong side of the aisle when he comes into the courtroom. He literally should just walk and sit next to the defense attorney instead of actually being on the prosecutor's side representing the public and the victims.
You used the word shocking. I could not agree more. It's shocking on so many levels. One of the levels it's shocking on is that we hear almost every day in the news and from the media, from advocacy groups about gun violence. And we could talk about the Second Amendment. We talk about gun violence for until we're all blue in the face. I understand that, but the fact is that so many people feel that if we eliminate all guns or we restrict the right to carry guns, crime is going to go down. And then you have a DA here that is really doing everything he can to ignore the ramifications of felons, already convicted felons, of using guns. And like you said, it is absolutely shocking. It really kind of is. I don't understand this. I don't understand. That's why I did say earlier that, there's a part of me that believes this is intentional to break down the rule of law, to create chaos in the society when you don't do some of the most obvious things that could reduce crime. So that's my little editorial there. Another area I would love for you to talk about, which is huge, is retail theft, organized retail theft. Coming from the California Highway Patrol, the CHP is in charge of the organized retail theft task force in California. And it was really just getting ramped up right as I was retiring. So I'm very aware of it, but I didn't have a lot of operational experience in it. So I'm kind of a layperson from the outside looking in. What are some of the strategies that you would utilize to combat this out of control problem?
So it's interesting that the problem has gotten so bad that the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, who constituents were going to her and saying, "What are you doing about smash and grab robberies and retail theft?" She actually has no law enforcement power, but she's the one who got together an organized retail crime task force, brought in the sheriff, brought in the LAPD chief as well, a lot of local law enforcement, and didn't even invite the district attorney to the press conference announcing this task force because he is such a lightning rod for letting criminals out rather than trying to prosecute them. So what I would do is actually do what the DA's office should do in this type of situation, which is to lead this effort. You'd have to make clear that, look, we're going to go back to enforcing the laws. And we don't have a situation where you don't have a situation where you've got a juvenile, whether it's juveniles or you've got adults thinking that the DA's office is giving you a complete get out of jail free card if you want to go into a store and either steal less than $950 or gangs sending in 16 and 17-year-olds into department stores to to engage in smash and grab robberies. So the DA needs to be front and center to send a proactive message to the community that we're back to holding people accountable. And what I want to be very clear by accountable is that I'm not going to adopt the other extreme policies of mass incarceration. In fact, George Gascon is on one end of the pendulum swing with decarceration policies, and I'm not going to go to the other end of the pendulum swing with mass incarceration policies. Where I come down is the middle. It's a middle that's been practiced by prosecutors like John Mckinney and his fellow prosecutors for decades, because it looks at each case individually. It looks at the defendant's background, the crime committed, the impact on the victim, to determine who the true threats are to our public safety. Very often, those are the repeat offenders, the serial offenders. And those folks need to actually be put in jail in order to ensure our public safety. But then there's the ones that aren't. Your first time nonviolent offender who still has to be held accountable for their actions, because if they committed a crime, they have a debt to society that needs to be paid. But very often the punishment for them can be non-prison. It can be community service. It can be restitution, pay the money back. It can be a diversion program if they have a serious mental illness or a drug addiction. But what you can't do is what George Gascon has done, and just decide upfront before you consider the facts and the law that there are certain crimes and certain criminals we will not prosecute. That literally is a message to them to embolden them, to incentivize them to commit crime, rather than the message we should be sending is to deter that kind of conduct.
Nathan, you used a phrase a minute ago, get out of jail free card, and that rolls into another topic that I wanted you to address. And that is, and by the way, John, I think both times when he was on the show previously, has done a fantastic job explaining the history of bail to myself and my audience. I would love for you to talk about cash bail, how it's been used or not used by the current DA, and what your plans are to really kind of restore a more traditional system of bail.
You know, it's interesting. I've heard John speak about cash bail and the reforms that are necessary for it, and I could not agree more. I mean, the idea of bail is it's a constitutional right here in California that you're actually entitled to bail. Slightly different, by the way, than the federal system, which doesn't have that as a in the Constitution. And the notion of bail is you're trying to do two things. You're trying to come up with a combination of conditions and money often that will both ensure that someone shows up for their next court hearing. We'll call that the risk of flight, and ensure also that someone doesn't commit additional crimes. We'll call that the risk of danger. So you've got danger and flight as the two primary risks that you're trying to come up with a correct bail amount to severely mitigate. And part of doing that, I believe, and I think John as well, is that if you bring a magistrate judge earlier into the process, so you can hopefully create a situation with the superior courts where they're willing to actually have magistrate judges on call 24/7. So if someone gets arrested, you can go ahead and have the information presented to the magistrate judge to determine what is the correct bail. I mean, in the past, we had a cash bail schedule that did not sort of tailor the amount of bail to the actual facts of a particular defendant, the defendant's background, the crime committed, whether or not it's part of a series of crimes or just a one-off crime. I mean, the whole works. But if we have this additional information, we can go ahead and actually create that situation with a magistrate judge and ensure a much more fair bail system.
Well, it's fantastic. And like I said, John has done a great job really of educating me all the years I spent in law enforcement, but he gave a great historical background. And I encourage people to go back and listen to both of those shows because it's part of really your platform. And again, it goes back to the two of you and other like-minded people sharing the same basic outlooks on the approach to restoring civility and the rule of law to Los Angeles County. And by the way, this is not just Los Angeles County. Los Angeles County, you said, Nathan, it really is. It's a leader. It's influential nationally, and you know how Los Angeles County goes, especially out of the pit of despair that we're in. For those of you who live in Los Angeles County, to where it can go, it's so important for people to pay attention and to support you. It does not matter where you live. I'm a little ahead of myself here from the closing, but it doesn't matter where you live in Los Angeles County, ladies and gentlemen, in this country. I'm supporting different DA candidates outside of Los Angeles County. I live in Florida. The point is, we need to restore justice and the rule of law, no matter where we live, to as many places as we possibly can. So, having said that, it kind of brings me pretty much my final point I want to touch on here, Nathan, and that is this should not be a political issue. In other words, the rule of law. I'm a registered Democrat. I believe John is still a registered. I'm sorry, Democrat. I'm a registered Republican. I'm gonna get all kinds of comments now. Oh my God, Mark's losing his mind. He's getting senile. Anyway, I might be, but I do know I'm a registered Republican. John is a registered Democrat. I believe, Nathan, you're a registered Independent. And the point is this: is that it doesn't matter what one's general political stripes are. Is that people who are fair-minded, who are objective, who believe in traditional rule of law can all come together on these basic foundational issues that we want our streets safe. We want people who commit crime to be held accountable. We want people to understand that self-responsibility is the foundation for any thriving civil society. These should be basic civic-minded topics that we all agree on. It doesn't matter what your position may be on taxes or social programs or how much maybe we spend in the military, things like this. Those are all great debatable topics. But my God, the idea that any two people who want a safe street for their kids can't agree on this no matter what their political persuasion is really beyond me. I just want you to go ahead and take it from there and chime in on that.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. Part of the reason I'm a registered independent in my political journeys, I spent 20 years as a Democrat, 20 years as a centrist Republican, and now I'm a registered independent running for a nonpartisan position where the ballot's already determined that we don't want politics in the position because they're not even going to list party affiliation next to your name. And we actually want the DA to be independent of politics. In fact, that's my whole campaign, to take politics out of the DA's office. Because you'd want your DA to resolve cases just on two things, the facts and the law, and not my personal political agenda that's predetermined which crimes and which criminals we will not prosecute. That doesn't work. So George Gascon, interestingly, he's not going to run on his experience because he has zero experience personally prosecuting or defending any criminal cases, and I have 34 years. He's not going to run on his record of public safety failure because it has failed in consideration for violent crimes, property crimes, shoplifting, hate crimes, human trafficking, fentanyl poisonings, you name it. So he has a record of public safety failure. So what he has said is that this is going to be a Democrat versus a former Republican. Well, I gave you my personal political journey. Well, what's George Gascon's? He basically has spent his first 38 years as a Republican and his next 13 years as a Democrat. He became a Democrat in 2011. So when he says this is a Democrat versus a former Republican, I assume he's talking about himself as a former Republican because he's been a former Republican for 38 years. I've only been one for 20. And I've been a Democrat for 20 years. He was one for 13 years, so I guess I'm the Democrat. But it shows the idiocy of his argument, because the argument, again, assumes that people are more concerned about politics than their personal safety, than the safety of their family members. And I couldn't disagree with that more. Because when I've gone and had the chance to travel all up and down this county, is that I've had the chance to find out and talk with people who are concerned about their public safety. And George Gascon, I guess, he just doesn't go out to talk to people and find out that they are so not interested in politics when it comes to this position. I mean, it's interesting. I've been backed now by 6 of my opponents. 4 of them are Democrats, one's an independent, one's a Republican, but they all put public safety over politics every time. Jackie Lacey, who's endorsed me, a Democrat, the first African-American woman to hold the position of DA, she's basically said, look, this is not about politics. This is about the failed social experiment that George Gascon has run at our peril. And he says, look, we got to stop that social experiment now, put safety over politics, and not let people be distracted by this notion that George Gascon's going to put out there. He is desperate. He can't run on anything else. And so he's going to try and distract voters in doing this. And I think voters are very smart. I think voters care about their and their family's public safety. And I think ultimately that's how they're going to vote in this election.
Well, I certainly hope so. I believe so, and we'll keep our fingers crossed and praying to the good Lord upstairs that it happens. I know you are busy, 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 Mr. Hochman, and we really appreciate your time. Before we go, John, I want to give you a chance to give your final shout out and support to Nathan before we leave, and I'll give you the closing statement, Nathan.
Well, let me just say briefly, I think those who have been listening to this podcast know why I and so many of my colleagues are supporting Nathan Hoffman. The man isn't just smart, he's brilliant. And he's lived a real life in the real world. He's had leadership positions. He's had the responsibility to supervise large organizations and to lead people. And these are all things that George Gascon is very light on. I won't say he has no experience doing those things. He was very light on that kind of experience. And he was in over his head from the very beginning when he became the district attorney. Mark, I believe he backed into the job in the wake of what was going on in the summer of 2020. But the reality is he's had 3.5 years now, a full term to prove himself. And there's very little, if anything, that he can show that he has done for the people of Los Angeles County over the last 4 years. It's been one story after another of heartbreak and disaster. And even the people who enthusiastically supported him through most of the last 4 years are coming to grips with the fact that we need a change. And I think a lot of people who voted for Gascon the last time are going to turn to Nathan Hochman and give him an opportunity to show what he can do. And I didn't vote for Gascon the first time because I was well aware of his history up in San Francisco, which was an unmitigated disaster. I was unfortunately right to predict he would bring those same failed policies here. And I know I'm right when I'm lining up behind Nathan Hochman and with an understanding of what he's going to be able to do for our local criminal justice system. So, every time I hear him speak, he crystallizes all of the issues. He's a great communicator. He takes responsibility and accountability for what he is saying and what he has done over his lifetime is exactly what we need. He's committed to public empowerment. He's committed to being a visible and transparent leader of the DA's office. He's committed to helping our youth avoid the criminal justice system, like many of the things that I care about and how we really win the future. And so I'm just very excited to speak on his behalf any chance I get.
Well, I'm excited as well, John. I'm excited to have you here to support Nathan Hochman, and there's an old saying that you can really go a long way judging somebody based on the people that they surround themselves with. And Nathan Hochman is surrounding himself with people like you, so I'm very happy about that. You're also right that Nathan, you are a fantastic communicator. It's reflected in your website, but it's even more obvious with this podcast. Like you said, John, how you crystallize, Nathan, the topics, how you're concise, how you're clear, and how you're unambiguous. So with that, I'm going to give you the final word, and I'm going to let you get back to your busy schedule.
Again, it's been a pleasure to be on this podcast, and I can't thank John enough for being brave. I mean, John actually is one of and he's joined by a number of his colleagues that have stood up to their boss. I mean, I can't tell you what a courageous action that is, and so appreciated not just by me, but by the entire public that you were willing to call out your boss when he engaged in illegal policies, when he engaged in ineffective policies, when he engaged in policies that quite candidly are endangering the safety of the people that you have sworn an oath to represent. So, John, thank you again for all your hard work over the years. And I look forward to working with John and his colleagues. What a unique and rare opportunity that would be if I have the honor to be DA in this county. I mean, we can do so much good for the people. I mean, we have to dig ourselves out of a bit of a hole that George Gascon has put us in. But I am so encouraged. I am so animated. I'm so amped up by the chance of having this opportunity to really bring safety back to Los Angeles County, to do it in a smart, reasonable, proportional way, to tackle our biggest problems of homelessness, violent crime, smash and grab robberies, fentanyl poisoning, and whatnot. and to do it with the consensus of the tens of thousands of law enforcement officers, with the hundreds of deputy district attorneys, being the champion of victims groups. I mean, this would be an incredible honor for myself. And I will work tirelessly every day between now and November 5th to get my word out, to get this message out to the community about how dangerous the policies of George Gascon have been and how we can really make changes on day one. So again, thank you so much for this opportunity to be on your podcast. John, thank you as always, and I really appreciate this.
It's our pleasure. I know I'm speaking for John as well, Nathan. And ladies and gentlemen, if you believe in the rule of law, if you want a return to sanity in the Los Angeles County and across this nation, quite frankly, but in Los Angeles County for purposes of this show today, please, I implore you, go to nathanhochman.com. Be a part of the fix. Be a part of the process to bring back justice and the rule of law to Los Angeles County. Nathan Hochman, thank you so much, and hopefully we'll have you on again before the election. Wish you the best, safe travels to you, and again, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you.